Diogenes was not just a philosopher, he was a living paradox, a radical mirror held up to society in its most uncomfortable form. When he called good people the smartest fools, he wasn't mocking their intelligence or their intentions. He was highlighting the tragic contradiction of living virtuously in a world that doesn't reward virtue. Think about it. In a society that's built on appearances, manipulation, and self-preservation, the person who chooses honesty, simplicity, and self-sacrifice looks like an idiot. Yet Diogenes believed that this apparent foolishness was actually a sign of deeper wisdom. Because only someone who sees through the games of society can reject them entirely. Only someone who understands how the world really works can choose to live differently, not out of ignorance, but from clarity. We live in a world that often equates intelligence with cunning. The smartest person is the one who wins, who climbs the ladder, exploits opportunities, plays the system. But Diogenes flips this completely. He says, the true genius is the one who stops playing altogether. But why? Because the game itself is broken. If climbing the ladder means losing your soul, is it really worth the view from the top? Diogenes would argue that most of what we call success is just a polished form of slavery, chained to money, validation, status, and other people's approval. So when someone chooses goodness over gain, when they act with integrity even when it costs them, society might call them a fool, but Diogenes would call them free.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Still, Diogenes wasn't sentimental. He knew that goodness in the face of corruption is painful, and that kindness in a cruel world often gets trampled. He called good people fools not because they lacked intelligence, but because they willingly carried burdens that others avoided. They chose to suffer for the sake of truth, to live without masks, to reject what was easy in favor of what was right. And that kind of life hurts. It isolates you. It makes you question everything, but it also purifies you. Because when you stop living according to what society rewards, you begin living according to what your soul actually values. And that inner alignment, no matter how foolish it looks on the outside, is the highest form of intelligence. Let me ask you something. Would you rather be called smart by a world that profits off deception, or be called a fool by that world while living in harmony with your conscience? That's the question Diogenes was really asking. And it's not an easy one. Because to be that kind of fool, the good kind, you have to be willing to live with discomfort, doubt, and rejection. You have to be okay with not fitting in. You have to be okay with walking away from applause, from status, from things that everyone else chases. And that's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because once you stop needing to be understood by others, you start understanding yourself. So maybe the smartest people are the good-hearted fools who walk barefoot through a world of polished lies. Maybe wisdom isn't about outsmarting others, but about outgrowing the need to. Maybe the deepest intelligence isn't found in the people who win the game, but in those who realize the game is beneath them. Diogenes lived in a barrel, ate scraps, and insulted kings, and yet, over 2,000 years later, we're still quoting him, not because he fit into society, but because he saw through it. And he reminded us that sometimes being good in a corrupt world isn't just foolish, it's divine. Most people believe intelligence is about knowing more data, more logic, more strategy. But Diogenes flipped that idea on its head. To him, real intelligence wasn't about accumulation, it was about abandonment. abandoning the fake, the unnecessary, the soul-draining rituals of status and appearance. He saw most of what people called wisdom as a kind of sophisticated delusion. People spent their entire lives learning how to play a game. They didn't even question how to be admired, how to be rich, how to be envied. And Diogenes asked the question almost no one dared to: why play at all? Why invest your brilliance in mastering a system that destroys your freedom and your peace of mind? It's easy to laugh at Diogenes at the image of a ragged philosopher begging in the streets, mocking philosophers, defecating in public, sleeping in a barrel. But that's the surface. What he was actually doing was far more radical. He was testing the limits of human freedom. He was asking, what happens when I need nothing from society? When I don't care what anyone thinks of me? When I'm not dependent on your approval, your praise, your hierarchy? That's the kind of freedom most people can't even imagine, because their lives are built entirely around needing to be seen a certain way. Diogenes burned that mask to the ground. And this leads us to the heart of his philosophy. The good person is a fool only to fools. And to the average mind, a person who gives more than they take, who refuses to manipulate, who tells the truth even when it costs them, seems naive. But that's because most people are looking at life through the lens of fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being respected. But when you remove that fear, the whole game collapses. And in its place you find something terrifyingly beautiful. You are free to live exactly as you are. That's why Diogenes could insult Plato to his face and still sleep peacefully at night. He wasn't trying to win. He wasn't trying to belong. He was simply being. But here's the paradox. Rejecting the game doesn't mean rejecting people. Diogenes wasn't a misanthrope. He didn't hate humanity, he hated hypocrisy. And he believed that the only way to truly love people was to see them clearly. Not as roles, not as status symbols, but as flawed, funny, fearful little beings just like himself. And from that place, goodness becomes something deeper than moral performance. It becomes compassion without attachment, honesty without cruelty, simplicity without shame. That's the kind of foolishness that confuses the world because it doesn't play by any known rules. It's post-strategy, it's post-image, it's pure. So let me ask you this. If you could live your life fully aligned with your values, but it meant being misunderstood by almost everyone, would you still do it? That's the Diogenes question. That's the question that separates the smart performers from the wise fools. The world will always reward cleverness more than character. It will always give trophies to those who manipulate better. But at the end of the day, when you're alone with yourself, no applause, no spotlight, no audience, what will matter more? That you looked smart, or that you lived real? What could be more foolish than a man who lives in a barrel and mocks kings? To the powerful, Diogenes must have seemed like a joke, a dirty man with no possessions, no position, no status. Yet, centuries later, we remember his name, and the names of most of those kings have faded into dust. Why? Because Diogenes understood a truth that most people even today still run from, that power is temporary, but character is eternal. The throne may impress today, but the barrel humbles forever. The world may forget what you owned, but it never forgets who you were when no one was watching. Think about this. Alexander the Great, the most powerful man of his age, traveled just to meet Diogenes. And when he stood before him, expecting awe or at least respect, Diogenes didn't even flinch. He didn't bow. He didn't flatter. He simply said, "Stand out of my sunlight." That wasn't arrogance, it was enlightenment. Diogenes had nothing to gain from pleasing Alexander. He had no fear, no need, no desire to submit. And that terrified the powerful. Because the free person, the one who cannot be bribed, bought, or broken, is the most dangerous person of all. They are immune to the traps that ensnare everyone else. So when Diogenes said good people are the smartest fools, he was pointing to a deeper kind of strength. The kind that doesn't need to be seen. The kind that doesn't need to win. The kind that walks away from the game, not because it's too hard, but because it's too small. While others race for crowns that crumble, the good fool sits quietly with peace. And over time, the world begins to notice. Because in a storm of ambition and ego, stillness is louder than shouting. In a world that worships power, the person who doesn't want any becomes magnetic. They glow with a kind of untouchable truth. And here's the heart of it. Being a good person in a broken world isn't just hard, it's revolutionary. It's a form of protest. Every act of kindness in a system built on cruelty is an act of rebellion. Every moment of honesty in a culture of manipulation is a kind of sacred fire. And yes, the world will often punish you for it. It will call you soft. It will call you stupid. But Diogenes reminds us, the real fools are those who trade their integrity for applause. The real tragedy isn't being misunderstood, it's never having the courage to be real in the first place. So what does this mean for us? It means you don't have to be famous to matter. You don't have to be rich in spirit. You don't have to be seen as smart to live wisely. You just have to live in a way that makes sense to your soul, even if no one else understands it. That's what it means to be a wise fool. That's what Diogenes was. And that's what you can be too. Because in the end, the world doesn't need more polished performers, it needs more free minds, more honest hearts, more fools who are brave enough to be good. If this left you thinking, feeling, or questioning everything, share it. Somewhere out there is another fool who's trying to stay good in a world that calls it weakness. Let them know they're not alone.